Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the Women in Medicine Summit, a transformational CME conference happening September 13th to 14th at the Drake Hotel in Chicago. Engage in leadership programming, learn negotiation skills, receive on-site coaching and mentoring, and see who will win this year's I Stand With Her awards. This year, we're excited to offer unique programming that includes a special session on how using improv comedy can bring fun back into medicine. We also have financial sessions tailored to help you navigate the complexities of personal and professional finances. Discover ways to advance into leadership roles, combat burnout, and either reignite your love for your current role or find joy in a new career path. Don't forget our Friday evening gala, a highlight this year you definitely won't want to miss. Register now at womeninmedicinesummit.org and be part of the movement that is shaping the future of healthcare. Join us to network, learn, and celebrate the power of women in medicine.
Welcome to the Revitalizing Doctor podcast. We interview trailblazers in medicine that embody the Revitalize Women vision to empower women to innovate and influence medicine, to value authenticity, respect, and work-life harmony. We recognize the challenges in medicine, and we're committed to providing coaching-informed strategies to help you go from surviving to thriving. So the next 2 weeks of episodes on the Revitalizing Doctor are going to be with my friend, Mark Sayer. He's a very successful personal trainer in New York City and focuses a lot on strength training specifically, which there's so much research coming out that strength training is very important to our overall health. And I think something that's quite frankly downplayed a lot of the time. So I'm excited to introduce you all to Mark and get his ideas out there. I actually recorded this interview with Mark in September of 2021. So this was quite a while ago, but the information is still very relevant. And, I think this podcast is my opportunity to be honest and vulnerable with all of you. And so I had to do some soul searching. Why do I have these episodes recorded and I'm not releasing them? And the truth was, I was struggling with my own nutrition and physical fitness. And I felt that releasing this episode and talking about how important it was to be eating well and working out when I wasn't doing it myself was a bit disingenuous. So I don't think I'm unlike a lot of physicians during the pandemic. Our stress levels were really high and many of us gained weight. I gained about 20 pounds during the pandemic. And it's only in the last 6 months that I've had the mental space to really focus on eating better and moving more in a way that could really support my health. And I'm feeling a lot better mentally, physically, emotionally, all of the above. And what's been interesting for me is as I've been feeling better, my cravings around food have changed. I'm actually craving nutritionally healthy food. So if you have been putting your health on the back burner, I hope these episodes will inspire you to reach out for help. Mark will meet with people virtually. So if you're interested in working with Mark, please Instagram message him at SayerFit. And then you can also check out his website, sayerfit.com. And I have personally really benefited from working with Mark and from working with some coaches and nutritional experts in the San Diego area. So I hope that you as a woman doctor will prioritize your health and that this episode may inspire you to take better care of yourself.
Thank you for listening to The Revitalizing Doctor. We have an exclusive offer for our listeners. Get 20% off your Epocrates subscription. To redeem, go to the website epocrates.com and log in to your account. Click on the payment and subscription link to redeem the discount using code REVDOC20. That's all caps REVDOC20. This offer is good for new subscribers and cannot be applied to active Epocrates Plus subscriptions. Thank you for listening. Now back to the show.
Can you tell our audience a little bit about who you are and what you do and why you're interested in nutrition and exercise and performance?
I'm a personal trainer and certified nutritionist. I work in New York, and I also have an online business. So I work with people all over the country and occasionally internationally. This is a second career of mine. My first career was as an officer in the U.S. Merchant Marine.
You've done a lot of studying and training on nutrition and performance. I know it's hard to distill everything down into a nutshell, but what would you say your nutritional philosophy is?
I would say my nutritional philosophy is that it's a process. It's not a prescription because it's so individual. For example, like different people respond differently to carbohydrates. Different people have different food allergies, which I think there's a misconception in the population that food allergy always means that you're either going to break out in crazy hives and need an EpiPen, whereas sometimes a food allergy means that you're just going to see more water retention. You're going to feel more pain in your joints. So it's not going to necessarily stop people from eating those foods, if that makes sense.
Quick note, when Mark says food allergy, he's using what physicians would generally term more of a food insensitivity.
Everyone's least favorite answer is the one I usually end up giving a lot, which is it depends. So it takes a time, it takes a series of like trying different things and seeing what works for you, both from a actual like biological standpoint for your body type and body chemistry, and then also just for like what your lifestyle is. Because I can give you the best diet in the world, but if you're not going to do it, it's worthless.
So I'm sure you run into this a lot where people just feel really overwhelmed. They're working a lot, especially our audience of medical people, firefighters, everyone's too busy. What do you suggest when somebody's ready to make a change and how to track that? Because even that's overwhelming. Like, how do I even begin if I want to start eating healthier, knowing if it's actually helping me?
I ask them, like, what does a healthier you look and feel like? And a lot of times people don't really like answering the question. The question people are like, I feel like I eat good is something I've heard people say a lot. And I'm like, okay, well, define that. What does that mean? So first I would say we'd have to decide what does healthier mean. The most common thing I come across of in America is people are like, I want to lose weight. That's what healthier means to me. And often I'll ask them, okay, what do you weigh right now? And they'll be like, I have no idea. You know, we can't manage something that we're not measuring. So if a healthier you means that, you know, we want to see less body mass, we need to weigh ourselves at a consistent time, usually first thing in the morning or day. For some people, it's that HbA1c number.
HbA1c refers to the hemoglobin A1c, which is a marker lab value that we use to see how well your body is managing blood sugar. A value of less than 5.7 is normal, and 5.7 to 6.4% is prediabetes, and greater than 6.5% is consistent with diabetes. So that's great. I mean, we really have to decide on the metric, but how do you use that for clients that, I mean, most people coming to you probably aren't morbidly obese or actually have diabetes. How do you use that number in somebody that's, quote, healthy and not what I as a clinician would consider ordering that test for?
Great question. So my understanding is for the most part, it's only done if you're over the age of 45 or if you're showing symptoms or risk factors for diabetes. But athletes have been getting, when I say athletes, I'm talking more like say at the Olympic level, have been getting HbA1c for quite a while. To use that as a general indication of what inflammation in the body might be like, and also how well that particular person is utilizing carbohydrates. So for example, yours is outstanding, 4.8. Whereas sometimes I'll get people who will have, say, healthy looking body composition, but they just don't feel well. And I find out they're on, say, like super high carbohydrate, quote unquote, plant-based diet, and their HbA1c, even though they won't be overweight, they'll be 5.7, 5.8.
Very interesting. So what I'm hearing, part of your approach, one, what do you want out of your health plan, your change in nutrition and then finding metrics. And of course, you can't look at anything in isolation. And we know that as clinicians, I can't just look at someone's hemoglobin A1C and know everything there is to know about their health.
Right. And the reason why I like to say particularly like the hemoglobin A1C as opposed to glucose, the hemoglobin A1C, it gives you a 3-month picture because that's the turnover for the red blood cells. Whereas, so if someone's cheating on their diet, but they clean things up for just like a week, often that can show in the blood glucose being healthy. But the HbA1cs, it's a dietary lie detector test.
Oh, I like that term. All right. Well, fascinating. So I wanted to make this a bit more granular for our audience. And we have a lot of medical students and residents. And the truth is, if you're a resident in the United States, there are many weeks that you work 80 hours a week. And I will tell you what happened when I was a resident working 80 hours a week. It was usually an ICU month that was extremely stressful. And I prioritized sleep. And I decided I'd eat whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. And I didn't exercise because usually it was a 12-hour shift or more. Sometimes they were 30-hour shifts. And then I had to commute back and forth. So if you have somebody that's their reality, which is honestly a lot of our audience, that they're working a ridiculous number of hours and they are going to be in a sleep-deprived state, and that's just a fact. And we obviously would like to change that, but we can't right now. What would your advice be for them, kind of in that crisis mode of just trying to survive?
I would say realize what's going on with your body, which is in a sleep-deprived state. So leptin and ghrelin are going to be out of whack. So like the hormones that tell you essentially satiety and then also tell you that you need to eat more are going to be skewed. Then combine that with the fact that you're going to be stressed out. I would say sometimes just the knowledge of knowing that the hunger signals you're getting might not be as accurate, but be a good way to start. And then also you're going to be stressed out. So your body chewing produces a calming effect in your body. Also, carbohydrates help regulate stress. So no one ever says like, oh, I'm stressed out. I'm fighting with the family. I think I'm going to go crush a bunch of broccoli.
No.
So keep that in mind. And like an immediate strategy you could do is, because so much of chewing and the smelling of food, how it affects the olfactory senses and sends a satiety signal, I would say look for something you're going to have to chew. And ideally something that's higher in protein, because protein has the greatest effect on the hormone CKK, which is another satiety signal. So I would say like, look to have maybe a bag of beef jerky as opposed to a bag of potato chips, for example, especially something that's highly palatable, something like, say, processed snack food that's intentionally designed to be highly palatable and to make you over. Most snack food is designed to involve as little chewing as possible so that you just keep on eating and eating.
That's really practical strategy. So if you had to assign, because this is the way our listeners are, they're overburdened with work and life is crazy. So if you had to assign them like, hey, add these 5 foods to your grocery list that are going to be healthy for you, actually going to help with some of that blood sugar moderation, kind of avoiding those spikes, what would be your top 5 things for them to add to their grocery list this week?
I would say, so we're talking specifically like somebody on a shift work, right? So they need something that's convenient. They can't necessarily sit down and eat every 2.5 hours is perfectly balanced meal. I would say nitrate-free beef jerky, or like I really like the Epic brands of like buffalo and venison and stuff like that. So you want to look for the nitrate-free though. Then popcorn over potato chips. Kilo is an excellent one. Especially if you can find something that's lower in sugar. But like, I really like the lesser evil popcorn, because once again, if we look at kernel that's turned into popcorn compared to a potato chip, how much engineering and human hands is on the potato chip versus the piece of pop. So it's kind of terrifying that like basically there's scientists sitting around thinking about, how do I make this person overeat this? So the more, if, for example, a potato chip, put it on your tongue, it'll just dissolve. It's super high in salt. So it's very palatable so that you want to overeat it. Bag of popcorn, at least there's fiber attached to it, which is going to stabilize your blood sugar. There is going to be the act of chewing that is going to, affect your sense of satiety and also give you a calming effect. So those would be two of my go-tos there would be jerky, popcorn, also just gum, just having that effect of chewing, keeping your mouth busy without ingesting the calories. Raw nuts would be another good one. At the end of the day, I would say if you really are craving something sweet, it wouldn't kill you to have a Diet Coke, especially with like stevia or something to that degree.
Okay. All right. I'm surprised by that last one. So if somebody really is still enjoying the soda, you're going to give a pass on that one, but try to use stevia instead of some of the other artificial sweeteners.
Yeah, 100%. Especially if someone's looking at to maintain body weight. Yeah. Sodas. I mean, diet soda isn't going to give you cancer tomorrow. Pretty interesting. If you look at the one study that showed the cancer correlation, they were giving it to mice. And I want to say it would be for a human being, it would be the equivalent of you drinking like a Volkswagen size amount of like diets. The connection between those two, I would say like there's things that are going to kill you a lot sooner than a Coke Zero will.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Are you a physician mom with school-aged children feeling utterly exhausted? My friend Dr. Sheeta Shaffi invites you to take a little time this summer to join her in a small, intimate group for meaningful conversations. Dr. Shaffi is an emergency physician, coach, and mom to 8-year-old twins. She understands firsthand what you're going through. This isn't a pizza party or a yoga class. You'll meet for 2 one-hour sessions twice a month starting in July to help you move out of exhaustion, let go of mom guilt, and live a life you're not only proud of, but can truly enjoy. Connect with her on LinkedIn or Instagram at Sheeta Shaffi to learn more. Sheeta is spelled Shideh, and Shaffi is spelled Shafie. You can also check the show notes for a link so you can connect with her there as well. Well, I'm sure a lot of our listeners will be glad to hear that. Because, caffeine is definitely something that a lot of us use. And I, for one, don't have a problem with people using caffeine. It's just the more you use it, you're risking becoming resistant to it. So I just try to moderate the dose. And we have another episode that was on sleep. And Dr. Vinny Aurora mentioned how you can use caffeine in your favor, caffeine-assisted nap. Go back and listen to that because there is strategic uses of caffeine, especially when you're in these situations where you're just forced to stay up, which a lot of our listeners are. So we've talked some about nutrition, but I know that you are a big weightlifter. And I also suspect among a lot of our listeners, they may be similar to me, that they bought a Peloton during the pandemic and they're good at doing cardio. And I have a lot of physician friends that run on a regular basis, but I don't feel like a lot of us weightlift. And I was actually reflecting on what that's about when I was preparing for this episode. And my first experience with weightlifting was in high school gym class. And I was a nerd. I was on the golf team. I didn't do any other type of sports. And I just associate weightlifting with something I'm not good at, something that's hard. I have like these flashbacks of being in the weight room and kind of being made fun of with trying to get a large weight off the machine because I needed the lighter one. So what would be your suggestion? Why is strength training important? And why should our listeners start prioritizing that in their workout routine?
Great question. The reason why strength training is important is because if you are in a calorie deficit and you are not sending your body the message that, hey, I need to retain lean muscle tissue, your body's going to often lose, say 50% muscle, 50% fat. Then your metabolic rate overall, even though you're losing weight, will go down. I like to say analogy. So your body sees muscle tissue beyond what is required for the activities that you are, to use the word, threatening it with as a luxury, right? Whereas fat is a necessity. So like think about like you have like two, because like muscle tissue, whether or not your listeners know this, muscle tissue is burning calories, whether you're sitting around, no matter what you're doing. So somebody's 200 pounds and 10% body fat burns considerably more of calories than somebody who is 200 pounds and 25% body fat, because muscle tissue is metabolically active. Now, we see this as a plus because eating is a lot of fun. So it means that we can eat more and still look okay in our bathing suits. So, our brains in modernity see that as a plus sign, whereas our brains that are still on a 200,000 year or 300,000 year evolutionary timeline, the brain sees muscle tissue as a liability and fat is just like thumbs up, awesome. Because we don't know. In America alone, like it's only like a couple generations where famine isn't a risk. And like other parts of the world, famine is still, so like that's in our gene. Our body is very concerned about that. It's not necessarily concerned about keeping muscle tissue around. So if you aren't strength training, your body is going to kick that muscle tissue to the curb. What happens often with people is I'll see, let's say they get on the Peloton, they cut calories, they're losing 50% muscle, 50% fat. Then they get burned out. They gain 5 pounds of that back. That 5 pounds they gain back is 100% fat. And then they repeat this cycle of like, okay, well, now I'm like in a shame spiral. So I'm going to get back on the imaginary bike ride and starve myself. And I'm going to lose another 10 pounds, burn out, then gain another 5 pounds of fat back. And so even if your overall body mass might be tracking down, your lean body tissue percentage is being reduced. Whereas with strength training, you can, as long as you're maintaining, the only two ways people keep weight off is incorporating strength training and a high protein diet.
So, you've convinced me. I'm going to start adding weightlifting into my routine again because, it just makes sense. You just gave a very logical argument for it. But I think one of the other barriers is I can hop on a scale, which I have in my house, and that provides me a number. It's much harder for me to know what my muscle mass is, and it's harder for me to track. So then it's harder for me to feel excited about it because at least when I start my Peloton routine, I see that I dropped 2 pounds in the week. It's like, oh, I did a good job. So how do you coach your clients? How do they track results when it comes to strength training and gaining muscle?
Everyone has to I assess people, their movements and their strength, because you don't know how far it's going to take you to get somewhere without getting a baseline. I assign, depending on where they're at, compound lifts, and we track their performance in those measurable lifts. And at the end of the day, it's let's say somebody who is squatting, overhead pressing, and doing deadlifts. If the number they can put on the bar goes up and their body weight stays the same or goes down, we don't necessarily need like an in-body or a hydrostatic weighing to tell that they've probably increased lean muscle tissue.
That makes sense. So again, what it's coming back to is tracking things and, knowing how many reps you're doing and what weight. And that's a metric that people can use.
I would say one of the barriers as well to strength training is people trying to skip like the first half of the alphabet, like people going from like G to Z, and then things hurt or the movements aren't full range of motion or quality, if that makes sense. So it's like maybe they think they went up in weight and squat, but really they just reduced the depth a couple inches. And also opposed to say like things like cardio, if you are doing good strength training, you are moving your body through a full range of motion.
Now thinking back on my residency time, I probably could have incorporated a lot more strength training because you're stuck in the hospital, but there are down times. So let's say you're stuck in the hospital, you've got like a 15-minute break where you can do something. What would be a go-to strength building exercise that you can do with no weights?
Well, I would say like that is the time when you wouldn't necessarily be building strength, but you could make sure that you still own the real estate of the range of motion, like say overhead range of motion. And actually, when I was still working with more corporate clients and desk-bound clients, I developed a whole method of no sweat exercise called the Resilient Method. If you go on YouTube and look up Resilience NYC, there's still the core 4 is my go-to at that, which is basically a standing pelvic tuck. And then you use the desk to do a crunch while keeping, once you learn how to orientate your pelvis and your ribs, then you just reach over your head and maintain. So it's called the swimmer mobility for overhead range of motion, then the 3-point hip hinge. And then finally to just hit a half kneeling stretch. So that's the core 4. So that would be my go-to for somebody who only has 15 minutes and they can't necessarily like break out into a sweat, is that to just look at those YouTube videos that are up there, or the Resilient NYC Wellness Instagram.
Awesome. And we'll definitely put those links in our show notes. So let's come back to that idea of a lot of physicians, for whatever reason, we like to be on the Peloton and we like to jog. We were talking about earlier before we were recording why that might be going on. So what do you think is going on underneath the surface when people engage in jogging and Peloton?
So often I find that, people who are engaging in jogging Peloton will ask them, okay, so like, what are your metrics to know that you're getting better at this? And there aren't any. Or sometimes we'll start an exercise program, that I'll be designing for them and implementing, but they don't want to give up the Peloton, or they don't want to give up the slow plodding jogs. And the thing that I find often is that it's not necessarily the exercise that's keeping them engaged with that. That is the only time they give themselves permission to not be plugged in. Someone might not allow themselves to turn off message alerts on their phone when they're going for a brisk walk. But when they jog, they listen to music. One of the only times, let's say they even like put their phone at home. Same thing with the Peloton. They won't be looking at their phone. So I feel sometimes it's more of a correlation, not causation. They feel better just because they're either addicted to their phone or they won't give themselves permission to put their phone away for 30 minutes.
So I think what you're really getting at is we're not saying that jogging or doing the Peloton is bad. And there's certainly cardiovascular benefits to 30 minutes of some type of brisk walk, jogging, spinning. But if you're trying to get at a specific physical goal and that's all you're doing without tracking anything, then it's not surprising that you're not building muscle mass or losing weight.
100%. Also, from a fat loss perspective, say something like, if you're familiar with the fan bike or the assault bike, that is the most effective. Doing intervals of that where you're, 30 seconds as hard as possible. I'm hitting a certain wattage. And then I have a, say, like 2-to-1 rest ratio. That is highly effective. That's what someone who's like an elite athlete does to burn body fat. However, it's not entertaining.
All right, folks, we're going to leave it right there with part 1 of my interview with Mark Sayer. I hope you'll join us next week for part 2 of my interview with Mark. If I could also ask you a huge favor, and if you're listening to us in Apple Podcast app, if you can scroll down and you'll see that there's a place where you can tap to rate us, I would love a 5-star review from you. And then if you can write a review. So I have just learned recently that it really matters what your rating is and that people take the time to write a review. And when we get to this magic number of 500 reviews, that will really help other doctors find this podcast. So I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. And if you could like us, follow us, and write a review, that would mean oh so much to me. I hope you're having a great week, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks for listening to The Revitalizing Doctor, a project of Revitalize Women Physician Circle. Our mission is to connect women physicians and allies through innovative, value-based coaching methods that align trust, support, accountability, and skill development to ignite the courage and clarity necessary to take bold actions, create change, and thrive. If you're interested in working with us, check out our website at peoplealwayshcc.com/revitalize or email us at revitalizemm drausten.info@gmail.com. This podcast represents the views of our host and guest. It does not reflect the views of any institution we work for or with.
Hi, it's Dr. Risa E. Lewis, dropping in to tell you about a book that Dr. Adara Landry and I wrote. It's called Microskills, Small Actions, Big Impact. It's a business self-help book coming in 2024 by HarperCollins. Pre-order now. Microskills, Small Actions, Big Impact, wherever you buy your books.